Rick Coos.
Former mayor.
Oh, yeah. Good. Okay, we'll call the Saline City Council work meeting to order at 5:35 p.m. Members present this evening are Council Members Seo, Delorco, Gearbaugh, Rice, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, and Mayor Marl. From city staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, Treasurer Cole, DPW Director Sherrills, Wastewater Treatment Superintendent Briggs, Parks and Rec Director Scruggs, Deputy Parks and Rec Director Lambert, and I believe that's it. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted unless there are amendments.
Move to submit.
Thank you, Mr. Seo. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Dillon. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. I would defer to the city clerk. Have we heard from Councilmember Kamara Sulak? Okay, then we'll deal with an excuse of his potential absence at the end of tonight's meeting. At this time, we come to public comments under the Open Meetings Act. Any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Excuse me. There's no one in the audience. Clerk Royal, did you receive any communiques in advance of tonight's meeting which the individual wanted their comments read at this time? The answer is no. Then we will proceed to the one and only discussion item, which is ClearGov CIP FY23 through 28. City Manager O'Toole, you are welcome to begin.
I'm actually going to let Treasurer Cole kick it off, and then I'll take over when we get into the actual project discussion.
Good evening, Council. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon, evening to discuss our capital plan. I would like to take a step back and acknowledge the fact that the department heads have been working since last fall to come up with this new revised plan. With so many of the department heads being new, it was a great opportunity for us to really look at what the city needed in the next upcoming 6 years to grow and have its infrastructure be what it should be. So with that, we have a new capital software and outward-facing portal that is called ClearGov, that we have entered in all of our projects in. And we're going to show you quickly the dashboard that is inside of ClearGov. And looking at what ClearGov can do, we've decided that what would be best is it has a lot of good reporting functionality. As you can see up here, this is inside the portal that's on the screen, and it lists out the projects. It does kind of lay out the different sources of funding and what's needed for each year, and breaks it down by department. In the transparency model, which we're going to show you in just a little while, that is public facing, it has all of the same information in the transparency module. So the only difference really is that it doesn't have the reporting functions that the inside of the ClearGov software does. So what we'd like to do is invite you, if you would like to have more information and like to be part of the inside team that has access to the request manager and all the projects that we're working on, and it would like to see some of this more reporting functionality. We'd like to invite you to come in, and I can give you a username and a password, and I can kind of give you a tutorial on how to use ClearGov if that's what you'd like to use. Otherwise, we're going to be using the transparency website, which Colleen is going to show you, and you can access all the same information off that transparency website. So with that, Colleen, do you want to pull up the transparency website?
Absolutely. So again, it's all the same software, but there's different modules within the existing software. So capital budgeting is the inside tool that we use. You all have access rights to that. Again, happy to set you up, do a deeper dive if you want to learn how to pull reports through that system. But the ultimate goal of that is that's how the sausage is made. The transparency side is the actual end results of that. So these projects are visible through now a public portal, and this portal is currently public facing. Let me pull that up.
Can we get where you're going from the link you just sent out?
Yes. So the link I just sent is this exact public-facing portal. So when residents or anyone logs in, you don't need a separate login information. You don't need to create an account. This is all readily accessible. They'll get a demographic snapshot. We have the option to, once we update and finalize the FY24 budget, to add information about that year's budget to this snapshot page. But ultimately, what we really want to get to is this project list. So these projects right now are all of the projects that have been submitted by department heads. So this is department heads, I would say, recommendations on everything that they believe needs to occur within the next 6 years. Obviously, it's up to council to ultimately decide what our priorities are and where dollars are going to be spent. So we're happy to dive into any of these projects individually to talk more about them. But from a broader perspective, if we want to just switch back real quick, there is the question of the unfunded portion of these. So the benefit of working in the first module that we showed you is that it's easy to identify and report out what of these projects does not have a clear funding source. So the document that you received, the supporting documentation that you received along with the link in your council packets outlines what's called Funding Source 15, and that's just a holding spot for any projects that don't yet have TIFA or general fund dollars or Act 51, some sort of specific funding mechanism for them. Other projects, when you open them up, you will see the exact funding sources. So for example, the Clark Street project, we have funding sources fully identified for that project. It's in the design engineering phase. Other projects do not have any funding sources identified yet. What's that? Oh, for you. You had to give me something that starts with a W. So, for example, water tower number 3, we have a rough estimate of cost, but no funding source identified yet. And that's what we're talking about here, that funding source 15. And that's generally in relation to projects that are just in that proposed stage, a little further out. This is 2027. So what we're asking council to do is really, let's deep dive a little bit into these projects. Where do we feel that our priorities should lie? How is this information best presented to you in terms of making decisions? And then ultimately, if there's anything on this list that you'd like to see amended, added, or removed.
And if I may add one other thing too,
Please.
with ClearGov, this is a live version of our capital plan. It's always going to be changing, it's always going to be updating, just like our plans update, just like projects come in over what they were budgeted or under, or a project doesn't go forward for a specific reason. We will be continuously updating these items for you, so anytime you go to that transparent link, you'll be able to see what's real and up to date.
Yeah, so on this section of that transparency page, once actual expenses begin to be incurred, you will see a line underneath this that shows expenses to date.
Is the equipment revolving fund tied into it?
Yes.
Okay.
Though we did not add equipment as capital items. These are all capital projects, like construction projects.
Road projects, there's, we're dealing with the equipment purchases as part of the asset management plan and not the capital improvement fund.
Yes, so moving forward, we'll continue to just maintain within that equipment revolving fund, yeah, the vehicle replacement list. And we'll continue updating that annually and operating off of that as its own fund mechanism.
Okay.
So you want to do a round of questions now?
Yeah.
City Manager O'Toole? Okay, before we open up for questions, Director Searles, Director Briggs, Parks and Rec Director Scruggs, any comments at this time? No, easy enough. All right, let me start this evening to my immediate right, and I'll end with Mr. Gearbaugh. So I'll start with Councilmember Dillon, go CO, Kamara Sulak, jump back to Rice, Del Orco, and then Mr. Gearbaugh. And for this first round of questions, we will limit you to 5 minutes. Please begin, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon.
Thank you. Just first, when you talk about seeing things change, is there some sort of way in which they're going to be delineated that there's a change to something? Is it asterisk? Does it give you a flash of, hey, this has been updated or this fell off or something like that, so you know what's changed?
So within the ClearGov software, yourselves or any residents, if you're very specifically interested in a project, there's this subscribe to project updates tab on each of the individual projects page, and you would receive an alert every time there's a change to that page. I do not believe that there is just like a general any changes alert functionality within the software. So you would have to subscribe to the projects you're interested in seeing changes to.
That is in development right now.
Okay. And then currently, the way that these are, they're just put in here by department heads, they're not ranked. Like,
Correct.
Number one is not our first priority.
Correct. Right now, the project page just shows in alphabetical order. So there's no, this isn't ranks of priorities in terms of locations. There is a scoring mechanism within the software, but again, we wanted council direction on projects, policies. You know, we know the overarching direction is core programming. Certainly, we can make recommendations on things that, for health, safety, and welfare have to occur. But there is certainly some discretion here, especially in regards to those projects that don't have funding identified, because they would either need to be financed through a bond, which would require incurring debt, or kind of shelved until some sort of funding mechanism could be identified, much like we have with the Riverwalk project. We're going to originally phase that out over multiple years, and now because of the funding opportunity that we were able to secure, that whole project can be realized.
Okay.
City Manager, could I stop you real quick? Can I pause Mayor Pro Tem Dillon's time? As I think about public interfacing and those who are watching tonight or who may be watching or reading about tonight's meeting, can you provide, can you go through the list of anticipated projects, City Manager O'Toole, and maybe give like a 10 to 15 second overview or description of what that project entails?
Sure. So I might need department head support on some of these, especially, I'm looking mostly at Bill because I don't know all of the equipment at the water and wastewater plant. So the backwash pump station, that is a water treatment plant project, pump replacement. The bridge comprehensive rehabilitation plan, so that's driven by city engineer Humphreys. This would be a consultant engineer performing a plan to then make recommendations on corrective actions or repairs that are needed for a bridge. The City Hall parking lot signage is updating all of the signage to reflect the new names for the parking lots. We've tentatively put that on hold until we know if council will also want to consider paid parking at any of those facilities, because obviously it would make sense to do that in conjunction. The Clark Street reconstruction, that's a street and utility project, which we have some federal aid for. Dam rehabilitation, again, this is going to be driven by recommendations and action plans that arise out of a consultant engineer study. The dam removal feasibility study is something for which we submitted a grant. There would be more information. This would be one of those activities that's driven by if we receive grant dollars. East Belton Maple, we've been talking about pretty extensively. That's the sanitary sewer, extensive utility work and reconstruction of Maple Road. Where did my list go? Sorry, I jumped there. Grade 4 and 5 sanitary lining and manhole rehabilitation. This is a part of our asset management plan, so repair of deficiencies that are identified within the sanitary sewer collection system, so either lining of specific segments or repair and replace of manholes. We have a pretty sizable dollar figure already earmarked for this year for that, but it would be continuing forward. Similarly, for storm, there would also be number 9, grade 4 and 5 storm rehabilitation projects. Number 10 is replacement of the media for the green sand filters at the water treatment plant. That is something that's a project that's being assembled now. Grit removal upgrade. Bill, could you give me a 10-second on that one?
Sure, that's, the control panel for that was suggested to be upgraded 5 years ago, and wasn't done, so now it's been processed publicly 10 months.
High service pumps, that's another project that's currently in process. That is addition of the 3rd high service pump at the water treatment plant. Iron filter valve replacement, that is replacing all the outdated valves on the iron filter. We had done a small project to repair leaking filters, so that's just a continuation of that. McKay Street and utilities, very straightforward, street and utility repair and replacement on McKay. MCC buckets, RBC.
We have RBCs right now out of service because the electrical buckets, the motor control cabinet buckets are broken, and they're in the process of getting ordered right now.
Light needs to be illuminated at the base, Bill.
Check. I got to eat it instead, I guess. So did you get all that about the MCC buckets?
Yep.
Okay.
Mill Pond Park romp surface replacement, so this would be removing all of the existing surface around the Mill Pond Park romp structure, putting down a new landscaping barrier and replacing the existing surface. North Ann Arbor Street and utilities, repair and replacement of existing utilities and the streets. North Harris Street water main lining. Certainly, I think we've seen a number of water main breaks along North Harris Street. This would be to line that section of water main to prevent any future breaks. The Oakwood Cemetery retaining walls, one on Monroe, one on US 12. That's just to shore up existing conditions. Those would occur at different times, and I believe one we're already moving forward with designing. People's Park pickleball courts, very straightforward pickleball courts at People's Park, though this version does include some more earthwork to it than had been considered in the past. Pump station modernization, that's a project that's been ongoing for which we received federal dollars to help support. That's upgrading all of the sanitary sewer pump stations in our system. We expect that to carry over into FY24. RBC shaft repair, same thing. It's a project that's currently ongoing. Repair of one of the BOD units on the rotating biological compactors at the wastewater treatment plant. Rec Center ADA doors, so replacing the existing openers. Rec Center airflow test and balance. That's part of their HVAC system. Rec Center aquatic floor, so performing a study to actually determine what floor material would be best, and then moving forward with repairing or replacing the existing flooring in the aquatic center. Similarly, aquatic center windows, replacing the existing windows. Rec Center cardio weight room, replacement of the weight room equipment. Rec Center chemical feeders, replacement of the chemical feeders for the pool. Dectron accumulator. Sounded like made up words. Do you want to? It's a thing. It's a thing. Okay.
Got great pictures.
I don't quite understand the whole thing as well, but the accumulator is a part of the Dectron, and it tends to rust because of all the corrosive air that comes through the ventilation system through the Dectron, because that's a dehumidification system for the pool area. And the accumulator is a vital part of the Dectron, and you have to make sure that it's functioning properly.
So similar door replacement at the rec center, LED lights at the rec center. Marsite is the lining that's inside of the pool, so replacement of that. Venting of the pool boilers, retiling of the hot tub at the rec center. Some basic security and fire alarm system upgrades. I believe the existing system is outdated and can't say to have new users added, so that is something that's targeted for FY24. Replacement of the boiler for the rec center spa. Road improvement projects. This is a general catch-all for a comprehensive study that we will be doing in FY24, at which time, using PASER ratings, we will make a more comprehensive recommendation on what years and what types of projects we'll be pursuing outside of the existing standalone street projects you already see here. The road rehabilitation plan is just the plan that predates the project itself. Normally, we wouldn't put plans in the capital improvement project, but because these are types of plans that will ultimately lead to capital projects, we wanted to be able to show public-facing the progress towards completing those plans. Sand filter building, Bill?
Yeah, the rooftop makeup unit for the heat in that building is in the process of being completed here, hopefully this week.
Sanitary sewer rehabilitation plan, again, I talked a little bit about the grade 4 and 5 defects, but once we check those off the list, it's really quite past time again to do another study of this system. So this will be step one, and this will be pretty extensive televising, and then an annual contribution to go after additional lining or repairs that are needed. SCADA upgrades, again, is a bigger catch-all for a larger project that will be based out of having some outside support help us with creating a plan, an action plan for ensuring that we have that essential software for all of our utility assets. TEF Park play structures, replacement of the south play structure, tennis court renovation, just what it sounds like, replacing the tennis court surfaces. Transformer replacement for the UV filter at the wastewater treatment plant. The US 12 sidewalk project would be installation of a connector sidewalk along US 12 on the west side to Austin Road. The wastewater treatment plant project, I think we've talked pretty extensively about what's going on there, numerous upgrades. Water Tower 4 would be identifying a location for and installing a third water tower. Well 8 would be identifying a location for and installing what will effectively be a 5th true well, but because of the numbering system that the state uses.
Actually, it would be the 6th.
6th well, okay.
We have 4 right now, working on a 5th one.
Okay,
Be completed.
so a new 6th operating well. Woodhill Street and Utilities, we talked about recently, that's replacement or repair of the existing utilities and street along Woodhill. That also includes Marlpool. The Mill Pond River Walk is the connector pathway from the Mill Pond parking lot to Michigan Avenue. West Belt rehabilitation, very similar to what you're seeing with this year's East Belt project. This would be rehabilitation of the main sewer trunk line on the west side of town that runs through Mill Pond Park and Curtis Park. RO membrane replacement is replacement of the filters on the RO units at the water plant. Sludge recirculating pump.
Yeah, that's one of the units that's been down for quite some time for the digester recircuit pump. There's supposed to be 2, we only have 1 functioning, and the other one needs to be repaired.
That is a very quick summary of all of those projects.
That was very good. I realized that was a bit onerous, but I think that having a brief description for every item is beneficial to the public. And then secondarily, you indicated before we transitioned to Q&A that you're also looking for some consensus. And if people think there are projects on that list that need to be fast-tracked and prioritized, you want to know about that. And conversely, if there are items that are less of a priority, that would also be helpful information. So thank you for doing that. Ms. Dillon, please continue. I think you have about 4 minutes.
Thank you. So kind of getting back into the projects, and you touched upon categorizing them. So is there like a way that we can customize that process so that we rank them and we know, like, looking at this list of, what is it, 48, 49 things right now, of right off the bat, okay, this is a health issue, this is a safety issue, this is something where we know right off the bat where things can get flagged to prioritize. So even if it were a lower level project, it could find a way to be bumped?
Yes, so there is a scorecard system within the capital budgeting software. It would necessitate all of you to create that login and do some basic training with Treasurer Cole to navigate the system and see how to open those projects and input it. Alternatively, I'd be happy to just create a spreadsheet if that's easier for you all, where you can independently rank through like a SharePoint folder your projects. So you tell me what, how nitty gritty you want to get into using the software versus do you prefer, a more simplified spreadsheet?
I mean, it seems as though it's going to be harder for you to decipher if you've got, the seven of us, each ranking on our own. I mean, would it be easier to do that through some sort of like a work meeting, like we're like, okay, let's talk about this project. Here's the scope of it, and we sort of break it down into, these are all rec center projects, these are all road projects, whatever the case may be, and sort of break it down into that within the scope of those. And I don't know that we're going to have all of the information to be able to fully rank it based on the small bio that's included here. So I don't know how I would be able to do that.
Well, that's really what we're looking to use this opportunity for, is you to ask department heads if there are projects. I mean, some of these things are obviously much more straightforward than others.
Right.
If there are projects on this list that you have deeper questions about, this is that opportunity, or our department heads are always available to answer those questions after this meeting.
So then, like, looking very quickly at something, and you know which one I'm going to pick.
Pickleball courts.
Courts. That we've talked about for several years now. According to the diagram, they're fully funded because it says grant. So does that mean we already have a grant or we need to get a grant?
We already have partially a grant for the pickleball courts, or we received a donation for part of them.
Okay.
Carla?
We've applied for some funding through CARES. We have not heard yet. They're supposed to meet April 5th. And then the other portion is through TIFA.
But again, this project is now being identified to not occur until after the wastewater treatment plant project is complete, because we'll be doing some staging. Basically, the construction workers that will be working on the rehabilitation project will be parking at People's Court. So we don't feel that it makes sense to have a brand-new asset there that construction workers may be coming and going across.
Okay. Yep.
So you'll see that in 2027 now.
Wow.
Scheduled to go where the tennis courts, just north of where the tennis courts used to be, because there's a parking lot there now, right?
Yes, I can pull up the layout
It's south of that?
of that.
West.
Oh, sorry, you're right.
Is it opening? Yeah.
There's no room north of it.
It's taking its time.
Goes right into it.
There you go. So this is the, the old tennis courts were turned into the parking lot. This would go just south of the parking lot. And again,
West of the basketball court.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Before we transition to Councilmember Seal, I want to get back to something that Treasurer Cole said at the beginning of tonight's work session about meeting individually with council members to get them more acclimated with the system. I want to be respectful of your time. Would it be more productive to maybe have staff send out an email and group maybe pairs of council members together as opposed to doing separate meetings?
What I would recommend is to get an interest level of who wants to have the detail and all of the detail behind what's happening in the request manager, because that is how the sausage is made,
Yep.
versus the end product. So you'll find that there is a plethora of information out there on the transparency website. You can find pretty much anything that you need to know about a project out there. Obviously, some of them are more complete than others just due to the timing of when we're filling out the project, the information that we may or may not have at the time. So I think that it would be great if I get a strong request to have those individual meetings, to group them together, possibly. But if I only get a handful, one or two, then I'm happy to do those individually as
And you
well.
want council members to email you directly or work through the city manager's office?
You can email me, but please make sure to copy Colleen.
Very good, excellent. Okay, Mr. Seal, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Your Honor. 2 questions. Excuse me. First of all, the threshold for becoming a capital improvement project, is it the likely livelihood of the piece of equipment or the project that's being performed, or is it the price tag?
So it's typically the price tag, over $5,000.
Okay. Second, used to be we tried to look out 5 years for capital improvement project. I know by the time I got to the 4th and the 5th year, things were getting pretty fuzzy. Now we're going out 6 years.
The state does recommend, and sometimes for grant applications, require a 6-year plan now.
Okay, all right. Those are my questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Easy enough, okay? Mr. Kamara-Sulek, you have 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you. I won't need all the 5 minutes. There's a lot to look at here, and a couple quick questions. So we're not having a filter to prioritize yet. Is that something that will be done, and could that include like the dates as well, and maybe the dollar amount?
Sure, yeah, let me switch back real quick to capital budgeting reports.
No, it didn't. What Colleen is going to show you is that the dates and the dollar amounts are all within the specific detail of the module. So she's going to pull that open so you can see it right now.
Yeah, so really, I mean, in effect, staff has already made a recommendation on priorities by placing them in respective years. If it's a high priority, it's occurring in 2024. If it's an immediate need, it's probably occurring in 2025. Things that are on our radar, but maybe we don't have the funding sources for, because you can see, you know, street projects get a little bit larger coming out because we don't yet have funding sources for those, are going to be in 27 and 28.
Sorry, are we able to get to that screen?
Yes, this is what you would need the login detail for. So
So I logged in
okay, great.
as an account. Where do I go to next to be able to get to?
Capital budgeting. So you've landed on the home screen or somewhere else?
Transparency Center for the City of Saline.
We're going to send some technical assistance to you.
This is the outwardly facing
Okay.
portion. So you would need to, you are signed in, so go to.
List there.
Yeah, you just.
Did you guys create a login yet or no?
No.
Okay.
It says, basically, if you're a public employee, you should ask your manager to create your account.
Yeah, won't let
You
us.
don't have any access.
Okay.
None of us.
I was surprised because we didn't. But I will reiterate that all of the information, including a more robust timeline and project manager information, is in the transparency side. So a lot of the details that you might be looking for are existing in the transparency module as well.
But again, we can get anyone access to the capital budgeting side for you to view anything you want or create your own reports as well. So we'll
Yeah, I'm happy to do
just connect with Elle if you want to walk through that.
I'm very interested, and that's probably something I would imagine all of council would want, because that really, from what I can see, pulls it together, and it has a lot more colors, so you can.
Oh, Jesus.
Good, so,
We haven't shown
Well-
you the colors on the transparency side yet, so get
okay.
prepared to get excited.
This is coming from an assessor.
Yeah, right.
And so if a project were to be added or eliminated, will will we be alerted?
So once a project is approved by council in this plan, it will remain in this plan until council approves to have it removed.
So like upon completion,
Yes. So upon completion, you'll see through the tracking software, again, if you want to sign up for specific updates,
And that's on the transparency end only.
there is a progress tracking section, project management section of the transparency portal that includes when construction is complete. And so you'd get that alert notice that it's been updated to construction complete.
this is very robust. Awesome, very good. I'll,
Similarly, on the transparency side, we'll be putting in these timeline notes, like when contracts have been approved or substantial completion is realized, different milestones throughout the project.
and so it's really easy for you to input information, and then everybody has it.
Absolutely, yep. Yeah, we view this similarly, just as much as it's a tool for the public and a tool for you, it's a tool for all of us department heads to make sure that we're on the same page about the status of projects and really what next steps are coming.
Well, thank you for bringing this software to us. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Perfect. That was almost exactly 5 minutes, Councilmember Kamara Sulak. I'll transition now to Councilmember Rice. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. This is great. Super excited about this. A couple of things about the public-facing side, because I know we can get into the nitty-gritty on our side. But a couple of notes that I made. I recommend that on the public-facing side, even though some of these aren't in a stage yet, don't have any milestones, don't really have any timelines yet, that somewhere we note on here what's up with it. Like, this project is in the proposal stage, like using those words, or like this, we're still looking for funding for this project, or, something like that. So the public is
yeah.
not, what is this? Where is this?
Maybe this one. Yeah, all of them, that project management piece, all of them will have that.
Okay.
So it shows the current phase, and you'll see it's proposed.
Okay, so anything that's missing right now is just missing because this is just new.
Yes, yeah.
Copy that. Thank you for that. Secondly, so would the public be able to filter these by like their status or like completed target date, like that sort of a thing? Is there an option for that? Because if I were a member of the public, or even myself, like if I want to go into this and I want to say, I want to see all the projects that are currently in bid status or currently in construction phase, is there a way to do that?
It's something we could certainly ask of the software developers, but I don't believe that there is this time.
Okay. My only reason for that is, I scrolled and scrolled and scrolled and scrolled and scrolled. And so I could see where a member of the public would just be like, or even myself, like, where are we with these? Like, what, So that was one thing. And then, so at the bottom of each one of these projects, so for instance, I just clicked on parking lot signs. It's just the one I clicked on. It says submit a question or comment. To whom and how, and is everyone going to be able to see those questions and comments?
So right now, those questions are directed to City Manager O'Toole. And then the thought is that she would then, if she was something that she didn't know right off the top of her head, that she would direct it to the appropriate person.
Okay, but is it going to show, because this is join the discussion, is it going to show up like
Yes.
comments?
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, in effect, it could serve as like a FAQ section. Questions can be asked and answered within those individual project pages.
I might recommend somewhere on here putting some standard language about what, if you opt to delete something, you should tell the public why you're opting to delete. So like if someone comes in here and is like, this is a bleep and bleep, 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 I'm assuming you're going to delete
Yeah.
that. So you might want to put some just standard language in there about, having the rights to.
Yeah, very fair point.
That was all I have so far. I'm, like I said, very excited about this. I echo my colleagues' statements. I think we're probably all going to want the How the Sausage is Made tour, at least at first.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you guys build this up, it may end up being that I only end up using the outward-facing one anyway, but I
Great.
Thank you, Councilmember Rice. Councilmember Delorico, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Mainly, I just want to say thank you to staff for taking the time to enter all this data into this software. It must have been a very time-consuming, labor-intensive project. It's certainly helpful as a council member to have all these capital projects laid out and organized in this fashion. My only question really surrounds around how we can tie this into our budgeting process and our strategic planning process, and how we can use this tool to our advantage for all of us to be on the same page as we plan projects and make adjustments to budget line items and amendments and so forth.
So right now, we are continuously updating the budget to reflect the items that are reflected in the capital plan. However, when there's, no official approval of the project or there's no funding source, obviously those are not going to be anywhere in the budget or reflected in the budget. But that's our plan right now. We're just doing, until we get this approved. Once this is approved, it will be our living, breathing capital plan.
Right. So the reason I asked that question is because you talked about each of us going through training and then kind of rating and scoring the priority of these given projects. And my sense is that there may be a lot of discord or disagreement about which projects receive the highest levels of priority, why and when. So just in an effort to tie this into our budgeting process so we can all have a group discussion around I'm mostly concerned about the projects that aren't funded.
Mm-hmm.
Projects that have earmarks for funding and are moving forward and are on to bid are much less of a concern for me than projects that don't have funding sources, and how we can plan for grant opportunities to fund those projects, how we can look to our alphabet boards and so forth.
I do believe, too, that with this being the flagship year of this software, it's going to take a little bit of growth and experience in developing the best way to incorporate this plan into our budget. And I think that we're just going to be very adaptable and flexible with how we use it, especially for those unfunded opportunities. We do have a lot of unfunded needs, and they are needs. And these are the items that your department heads are saying are things that are extremely important for us to do as a city. So I believe that there will be a lot of discussion surrounding that. In the meantime, ClearGov is in a lot of development phase on this functionality that I think will be very beneficial to us, and I expect to see it in about 4 to 6 months come to fruition. So a lot of things are kind of going in cadence to make this a really great and useful product for us in about a year, where we've had that experience behind us. We've kind of started to tackle some of the big projects on there and really start to look at what are the unfunded needs and how are we going to tackle those.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. That's all I have.
And I just wanted to show for your own knowledge, on that capital budgeting module, each of the items that has a funding source has a specific line item tied to it. So it's connecting, like Treasurer Cole said, directly with our budgeting process.
Okay. All right, great.
Thank you, Mr. Delorico. Councilmember Gearbaugh, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Just some observations of the tool, and then also just some questions involving the actual projects and dollar amounts. So when I'm, say, GQ Public looking at this, I start comparing items. So if I look like at Clark Street and I compare it to McKay Street, I'll see like there's $1 million difference between the projects and the scope. And I drill in now. I know that we can, as council members, if we get that access, drill down into it. Will there be a more of a component aspect of what's comprising the dollars that make up that total project?
Wherever we can, we'll include an engineering opinion of cost. So for example, the wastewater treatment plant rehab project, we've been doing engineering opinion of costs for that like every 6 months, just because we need to know for financing purposes. But once we have actual bid dollars, we will update with the actual bid dollars and the bid documents. But that would be under the, on the public-facing portal. There's not, there's just a section on like shared documents, right? It's,
In the internal.
yes, and on the internal side, but just for the public's edification, those, trying to pull up one that has, like Clark Street will have some documents. Those documents are under the supporting material section.
looking at the demographic information, where does that generate from?
The American Community Survey.
Okay. Some of it just kind of looks a little odd.
No, that's the, yeah, American Community Survey for
I
you.
didn't know how-
It's a estimate sometimes.
I didn't know how that'll be policed through.
I mean, so we can turn any of these features on or off. Again, the reason that this is the way that it is now is because once we do finalize the FY24 budget, we'd like to put some budget snapshot information in there as well, so that that information is available publicly.
Yeah, it's interesting just looking at total population. On the one screen says we're up 378%. The other one says we've gone down by 3.3. So it's kind of interesting when you start drilling down into the details.
Yeah.
A couple of the items, the only one I didn't see, and I don't know if this is the time to mention projects you haven't seen, is kind of like the sidewalk completion project, overall sidewalks for the community, plus like the Ford sidewalk in front of the Ford property where Farici is. I don't know where we would put those into here or how we would have those added.
I think probably the broader community sidewalk project would just be underneath our regular general fund public works activities, but larger projects, I mean, if we're anticipating the expenditure of public dollars to put in the Ford sidewalk, we should add that as a project.
Or even if we add it as a project, but it may not necessarily be out of the general fund, it could be a special assessment or something like that. Do we
Yeah,
include those?
yes, we would want to include that. So that's a great example of, there's something on this list like that we want to see added, we can easily create and just mark it as, you know, the funding source isn't identified yet, but.
Perfect. And then I guess the only one I'd looked at is like the dam. It seems like there's $2 amounts being considered for two different proposals. So you have one about dam rehab and then one that says dam removal, and they're the same $2 amounts. So it's kind of, I'm not sure how that plays out, or if you could explain.
So I will try, but Tasha, feel free to jump in if you want to add anything.
Yes.
Dan,
Yeah, I can.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, hi, everybody. It's Tasha here. And that's actually more of a coincidence, Dean. Those are the best cost estimates I have. The one for rehabilitation was pulled from the 2021 structural report. Yes, the 2021 structural report. And I just bumped it up a little bit because it was 220,000. I think I put 250 in here, and the feasibility study, as you saw from the grant application back in January, was about that same amount. So that rehabilitation project is what we need to do in the next 5 years. The other project is more of the long-term study of the feasibility of removal.
Okay. That answered that one, thank you. And then just lastly, when we identify the $2 million in the out years for street replacement, we have $2 million each year. When we go into the detail, will we understand which streets are being identified yet?
No, that'll be a part of the rehabilitation plan that we're creating this fiscal year. So we obviously have Marpool, Wood Hill, McKay, North Ann Arbor, Maple, all on the docket in the next year and a half. But beyond that, we're going to be looking at actually having a consultant engineer work with us, taking some samples and putting together a comprehensive plan for replacement.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That's it for me. Thank you. This is an excellent tool, and I think working this in, I just happened to log into iLegislate today, and that also has the little bells and whistles that I
know we're throwing a lot of software at you guys, so we appreciate you bearing with us, but I think once we get past the learning curve, it's going to absolutely help in terms of putting more information at your fingertips.
I agree with that, and I also like the statement that was made earlier this evening by Treasurer Cole, which is this is a pretty significant paradigm shift from how we've conducted business in the past. And so whenever you introduce a technology of this type, it's going to take some time for full integration. So I think we're probably realistically looking at about a year until we're fully integrating this and using it to its maximum potential for the benefit of our city and ultimately its residents. So.
Absolutely.
Do you want to continue with some additional remarks, or do you want me to do another round of questions?
I'm completely open to another round of questions. I think it would be helpful to know, certainly if there are any projects or ways at helping you score these projects that you'd like to see. I think I'm kind of leaning at this time towards putting together a spreadsheet just to streamline it and make it simple, but if there's, I guess, specific criteria you'd like to see me reference in that, I can show you very quickly what the scorecard looks like inside the capital budgeting software. The only problem with that is it doesn't amalgamate responses. If you go in and gave a response, it would just be changing over the top of someone else's. So I would probably just be using those same criteria unless there was different direction. Let me pull that up for you.
And that scorecard is built in and meant for whoever is filling out the project, whoever's a project lead who is requesting money to kind of go through and say, this is why I feel this project is a priority over other projects.
But I guess what I'm leaning towards now is creating a spreadsheet for you all that has similar criteria and then just going in and putting the amalgamation of those responses into this system so that you all, we have one centralized response. But let me show you those criteria and make sure you agree. Oops. Okay, so this is the existing scorecard. The scorecard is across 5 areas: safety, environmental, operational, legal, and cost. And a higher score is a more positive impact, and then you can kind of see, it's a little tight, but I'll try to zoom in as much as possible. You can see how each of those areas are described here.
Gotcha. Okay. Very good. Sounds reasonable, or it seems reasonable to me, excuse me. Before we do another round of questions, let me defer to the city treasurer, wastewater treatment superintendent, DPW director, Parks and Rec director. Any additional comments at this time pertaining to our initial discussion or first round of questions? Getting no's from that table, except from perhaps Director Scruggs.
I do.
Please.
Just for what it's worth, this is a really good tool. I've done budgets for a lot of years, and it's a lot of work entering all this information, and I feel bad for Bill because he's got a lot of stuff going on. But you can put your plans in here, you can put RFPs. I mean, it's super, super valuable. So I'm really excited, moving forward. It's really going to be a good tool for us.
Good. Treasurer Cole, any additional comments before we do a second round of questions?
No additional comments except for to specifically thank Katrina Ritchie, who kind of her first task as we started this was to assist me in kind of pulling everybody together and getting these projects started. And she was phenomenal in kind of helping everybody get corralled and kind of get to the jumping off point on this. So I just wanted to send a special thanks to her.
Very good. Then we'll do a second round of questions. Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Several of my questions were asked, so I should be able to go through this pretty quickly. So I guess I'll just start with, what happened to old CIP projects? And when I say old CIP, it was things that were on our old strategic plans, things that we had sort of in motion that didn't sort of make the cut here. What happens to those?
Anything that was in the capital improvement plan did get carried forward. So last year's, we started the process with looking at this year's capital improvement plan and carrying forward anything that was in there. We did not look at the strategic plan because, again, there's kind of I think you all know my feelings about what we've called strategic planning in the past. I'm not sure the results of some of those weren't just wish list items instead of very well thought out, strategically placed goals. So, I would caution against using that document to inform this process at this time. Now, in the future with a true strategic plan, yes, absolutely, that would be a driver to the capital improvement plan creation.
Okay, I wanted to make sure about that. And then who's responsible, who owns the task of each of these items?
So you'll see each individual project has, and this is on the transparency side.
And I've seen that there's somebody listed.
Yes,
It'll
that
say
is
like
the
Tesha.
yes.
So that means Tesha is the only person that's going to be updating this?
No, updating functionality is something that PR Generalist Massey is going to be helping with. It's something that I can assist with, or the individual department heads. But yes, the primary lead is listed for every project. So that would be the individual that the updates are coming from, and either they're making the update or another member of staff is making it on their behalf.
And so what's the expectation of the time frame of those updates?
Any major milestone. So hitting design. I'll show you on, a great example is I've taken ownership of updating the wastewater treatment plant and rehab project. I'm not as good as getting pictures as Director Scruggs. She's the rock star on that functionality, but I think I built a pretty sweet timeline. Let's see, where's that project? So here is the project timeline for the wastewater treatment plant rehabilitation. You see on the left is the projected original timeline and then all the current updates. So any major milestone in that process, we're gonna drop in the date. If there's specific materials that are tied to it, you'll see them added up at the top under supporting documentation. But that is the goal, as we hit milestones, to report out on when they actually occurred and then add in the supporting documentation to that effect.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear because I think that's always been sort of that lag of what's happened to when it sort of
Yep.
made its way through the channels.
I mean, smaller projects will probably only have, 3 or 4 main points. Projects start, design engineering, contract award, project start, substantial completion.
Punch list.
But big, yeah, exactly. Yeah, the final punch list. But bigger projects like this, I mean, I expect once I actually get the bid, then within that, I'll have a whole other slew of projected timelines to add to the left side and bullet points to report out on the right.
Okay. And so I think I just have to learn a little bit more. So I'm in one of the rec center ones. I think this is Windows. And when you look under the funding source pie chart, it says funding source 15, and it's a full blue circle.
Yes, that means no funding has been identified.
Okay.
There's-
So is there a way of kind of figuring, so that people know what that means? Because if I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh, it's fully funded. It's all funded.
So
Yeah.
when we make this public facing and get the official, we'll probably switch that title to unfunded.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. And then, I mean, obviously, the other piece is, as we go to rank these, a lot of those rec center ones, I'm assuming we need to sort of wait on what comes out of the feasibility study and recommendations and such for that. I mean,
I think most of Carla can chime in here, but I think most of the rec center ones you see now are going to exist regardless of the feasibility study. The feasibility study may just add to them or add detail to them.
okay. I'll stop there.
Very good, perfect 5 minutes. Mr. Seal, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, can you show me something as mundane as replacement of a police vehicle?
Well, that would be under the Vehicle Equipment Replacement Fund.
So it's
So
not-
that'll be a separate annual replacement schedule as opposed to being in the capital improvement plan. Because once we set up that dedicated fund for equipment, we're tracking that all separately from our capital projects.
So you do the same thing with computers?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, technology equipment?
Yep.
Okay. All right. That's my only question I had. Thank you.
And Treasurer Cole, was the expectation that the replacement schedule will be discussed as part of the
Budget.
regular budget process? Yeah.
Mr. Kamara Sulek, you have 5 minutes if you'd like them.
I'll like them, but I won't take them. So looking at the wastewater treatment plant, construction commences this October 1st,
That's the goal.
Yeah.
and substantial completion April 30th of '26. Will that be updated along the way on the left side there, the project timeline? And then I'm assuming that there'll be other current updates as far as we're ahead of schedule, we're ahead of schedule.
Yes.
We're ahead of schedule.
You're very optimistic, yeah. So yes, once we actually get the bid documents, we finalize the contract with the selected contractor, they'll provide us with a project timeline, and that will get uploaded into the system and those new target dates. For the time being, we're really just estimating by what we've heard from the construction community about lead times for certain equipment.
Okay. So we'll know if there's any kind of a delay or that it's going to be done a year early.
Yeah, well, keep in mind, we're now we've gotten ahead of the primary clarifier by ordering one of those mechanisms, and based on the feedback that we've received through this process, you will all be seeing ahead of actually approving the contract for the project, a bid for a transformer and some other electrical equipment.
On the backup generator.
Yeah, the backup generator. We want to accelerate the timeline on those because of the lead times we're hearing about.
Okay. So this is good information for us to put out to the public that,
Yep.
you know, the estimates and all the times that we're ahead of schedule, hopefully. Wow, this is great. I think I'll be playing with this for a bit, but thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sulak. Councilmember Rice, you have 5 minutes if you'd like them.
Thanks so much. In the discussion that we had a couple of weeks ago, or maybe that was last week, I don't remember, when we discussed that you were updating your process for, Tesha discussed, and City Manager Tool discussed updating the process for project management and getting external feedback from community and things like that. I would love to see those types of milestones in these predicted timelines as well. Like, if you would say, May 2023, community town hall about such and such, or, something along those lines, or you can just update them. Because what I would like to do with constituents who have questions about these projects is push them to these pages and then say, follow for updates, and you'll be able to see when these opportunities for you to provide feedback or to get more information are available. So the more pieces of community content that we can put in this, the better as well. This is just so great. One question that I have as the newbie here, is there a precedent for council to rank these? Because in my mind, it would seem like I would be better suited if the department heads ranked them, came to me and said, here are the capital improvement projects. This is really important because we can't do this, this, or this without it. And then we come back as a collective with that information and rank it. Because right now I'm looking at it and I can't provide, substantial, feedback on ranking these.
No, there is not a precedent for council to do the ranking. Typically, how this process has worked in the past is council is provided with a static document that, department head said, this is everything that we need. I think Treasurer Cole and I have a very different philosophy than maybe has been adopted in the past. We really believe that, capital project and capital planning needs to be a living, breathing thing. We need to be flexible, adaptable, be able to respond when different circumstances arise. If anything, over the last 2 years, we've shown even the best intentions and the most well-laid plans are going to get waylaid by inflation, are going to get waylaid by unprecedented lead times for equipment. It's really council's preference at the end of the day. This is a document that ultimately we will take this offline, turn it into a document that you will adopt. So we want to do what you feel most comfortable with. Certainly staff is happy, or my office is happy to take the lead on making a recommendation regarding what those priorities are. We have a very good pulse on how we feel about each of these things and their essentiality, but I would defer to the council body as to its next steps.
Yeah, I would absolutely prefer, if anything, at least notes, at least saying hey, I know I have a lot of things on this list, but this is really high priority because it impacts the air quality inside of the pool, things like that. So I kind of liked those quality metrics that they had in there, in this. But we should probably adapt them to our needs. We don't necessarily have to use the ones that ClearGov is showing us. But I do like those kind of as a standard, just for my knowledge of how does this affect our operations? What is the environment? Those types of things I need the information on in order to make a well-informed decision. So that would be, and I don't know how the rest of my colleagues feel, that would be my recommendation, would be to, if you're going to provide us a spreadsheet, also provide us a column with either these impacts or some sort of notes or statements about the
Yeah, I think we could do like a staff ranking. And for context, the scorecard, it does have my changes to it already, so apparently I just write like a computer algorithm.
I mean, I'm comfortable, so like if that is how you, as the city manager, would score these projects, I'm comfortable with getting those recommendations from you, and then as a collective, us making decisions based on what, we feel and, additional information that we may have, but I need that first, for sure.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Rice. Good comments. Mr. Delorco, you have 5 minutes if you'd like to.
Yeah, I would just echo what was just said. I am not an engineer. I am not a city planner. I don't have legal expertise around some of these issues. We are a legislative policy-making body, and we defer to your judgment and expertise and the various department heads' training to guide us in that process. And the more recommendations that you can give us, the more seamless this process will be.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Gearbo, you have 5 minutes if you'd like them.
Just a couple things. When you're looking at this document, you roll over the numbers on the map. Of course, it supposedly scrolls to the next item that's there. How else can you search on this page? Say you don't know where you're looking for and you want to type in. I tried to go up to this search engine, and it basically is at the level of the city.gov. It's not a search engine within itself.
Yes, so through the Transparency Center portion, again, this is really subject to the software developers. We can make that comment to see if there's anything that they're planning to do to improve the functionality, but I don't believe that there's anything other than just these kind of overarching maps to help filter. I think, maybe we could update, just for ease of reference, something in the titles to say like what fiscal year it's starting or something, but that's probably about the best we could do in terms of helping to delineate based on the project title alone.
Because it's a similar issue with our C-clicks fix equivalent, whatever.
Yeah, it's just a master list.
Lists it right down, and it doesn't have much in it. And I agree with my Councilmember Rice. The issue is that I've always depended upon staff identifying where and what should be the things that are supposed to be a priority. That may have gotten mixed up because of the way council have approached an issue or something without the pushback or the qualifications of the information coming from staff. So that, can depend upon you guys at this point in time, you all, I should say. Where it gets more of an issue is if council starts to put your priorities onto something else that takes your time away from these capital projects, which has happened in the past and is a problem, been an issue. So whatever we can do with this kind of stuff, that we have justification, information, it gets harder and harder for council to justify going off the rails. And I appreciate that. For me, the other thing, though, in prioritizing is it's always going to be public safety, infrastructure, and whatever is health and safety concerns. As we get into these wish list items, which is what you properly identified, because I know people are going to ask, what happened to the pool? What happened to the splash pad? What happened to the farmer's pavilion? I don't know how we would identify those as projects or something that we don't want them to get lost because people are thinking about those, but do we not put those on this kind of a list until we actually have funding or a better idea of it?
I mean, we could certainly put them on the list and mark them as unfunded and put them, in the last year of the project budget as sort of a placeholder to not lose them. But, we would, for my purposes, if I was doing recommendation scoring, I would not provide them with a high enough score to ever prioritize them without the cost piece being fully realized.
Yeah, and I like how this is because this is actually telling us what the reality of what we need to fix. And some of these, I don't see any of these being really any kind of wish-ish items. I mean, they're necessities. The concerns end up being some of these necessities, are they going to continue to be what we want to continue to focus on, or do we have to find a different way to?
Yeah, I mean, everything on this list now is deemed essential by the respective department heads. There's very little fluff here.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is I think Councilmember Councilmember Rice, my colleague was quite articulate in her comments. My preference has been and will continue to be to defer to the experts, the boots on the ground who deal with these issues on a day-to-day basis in terms of prioritizing what's on this list. I mean, if you're asking my opinion, in light of an administrative consent order and a variety of other issues, anything involving the wastewater treatment plant is of paramount importance to me, and I think the community more broadly. So if you ever need anything from me or from council, I guess more specifically, to help fast track any of those items or provide you the necessary funding to make them happen, I'm willing to advocate and exert leadership to ensure that occurs. I do appreciate your remarks, City Manager O'Toole, about being flexible, because I think in the past, certainly during my tenure, there have been times when that is absolutely essential. And by way of example, I would cite the Michigan Avenue makeover, which was part of the reconstruct of US 12, which was initiated by MDOT. If we went back and looked at capital improvement plans from 2014, 2015, I'm positive that it did not state redesign of our city streetscape. But in light of a total reconstruct of US 12, that seemed reasonable to fast track that and to include that in revised plans. In fact, it would have been insane not to do that project in conjunction with the US 12 makeover. So again, I do think flexibility is paramount, and when there are opportunities or when events arise and things need to be fast tracked or move forward, I think we need to commit to doing that. So the action or the required response, rather, from tonight's meeting is you want emails sent to the city treasurer in which you're copied, so that, one, I hope everybody expresses an interest in learning more about the system and the software and both the internal component and the public-facing component. Once the city treasurer gets your response is, we can set up maybe a variety of meetings and perhaps include 2 or 3 council meetings in each session. Again, I want to be respectful of your time, and I think it would be not as productive to have 7 separate meetings with 7 separate individuals. So with that, are there any final statements from staff? Any pertinent questions from City Council that you'd like addressed in the imminent future?
Not a question, but
Yep.
Councilmember Gearbach brought up a good point about just how these are kind of named, and it gets all kind of willy-nilly. Director Scruggs did a really good job of calling everything rec center something, rec center something, rec center something. Maybe we could come up with some sort of a system for, like, if it's streets, it could be like street North Ann Arbor, or something along those lines, where, like, if it has a theme, it starts with the same word. I don't know if it's not going to be possible for everything, but like some wastewater treatment plant, like maybe all of those bits and pieces that get put in there, and instead of calling it sludge recirc pump repair, maybe it's like WWTP sludge recirc pump.
You don't find sludge recirc pump to be something you recognize?
No, it's not what I was researching for.
Yes, we'd be happy to go through those titles and kind of use a naming mechanism that started with maybe the department or the facility that they hit.
That'd be perfect.
Yeah.
Nomenclature.
Yeah.
I think that would be really helpful to our community, so, scrolling through 49 of these and having to click on each one if they're not interested in anything other than the rec center.
Yeah.
So.
Very good. Okay. Well, please send those emails to City Treasurer Cole. And if there's nothing further at this time, the chair would be delighted to entertain a motion to adjourn this work meeting at 6:47, meaning we will start very promptly at 7 p.m. Moved by Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Delorco. I'll get you on the next one, Mr. Kamara-Sulek. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Meeting is adjourned. see what time we got here, Ben.
That's
Okay.
fine. Just sit. Just shoot
Terry, you ready?
Okay.
It's 7 o'clock, okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order. If you please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. There are copies of the agenda on the back table along with hearing devices, and we would appreciate if you would please sign in. Members present from council this evening are council members Kamara Sulak, CO, Del Orco, Gearbaugh, Rice, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, and Mayor Marl. From city staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, Community Development Director Harrington, Wastewater Treatment Superintendent Briggs, Treasurer Cole, and Assistant City Manager Getzman. Yes, she is here. Very good. Before I entertain a motion to approve the agenda, it is my duty to inform council, staff, and the community of an untimely passing that occurred this weekend. Our friend and former colleague, council member and Mayor Rick Coos died unexpectedly. So we extend condolences and sympathy to his family and his loved ones. Mayor Coos was instrumental on a number of issues and items during his tenure as mayor and as a council member, including the acquisition and development of Rentschler Farm as a living history museum, the acquisition of the Bixby Marionettes, and of course he was a strong and stout advocate for transitioning our fire department from paid on call to full-time. So I would ask for a moment of silence in memory of our, again, friend, colleague, and former mayor, Rick Coos. Thank you very much. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted unless there are amendments.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Sulak to approve as submitted, sir?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dillon. I'll get you on the next one, Mr. CO. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We proceed now to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make a comment or question on an item that appears on this council agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments on agenda items? You will have 3 minutes, please.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Rob Bohr. I'm a Saline resident. I am speaking to support the motion of the adoption of Ordinance 853 that's going to be discussed today. And I'd like to highlight some benefits to both our community and residents for doing so. Recently, you may be aware that Governor Whitmer just signed into legislation HB 4460, which requires all communities in Michigan to reduce their solid waste to certain levels, primarily because Michigan's dismal rate of only having a 19% recycling percentage right now compared to a national average of 34%. The bill sets a goal of having Michigan's solid waste reduction of 30% by 2029 and 45% thereafter, so very aggressive goals and commendable goals. Every community will have to develop a local plan to accomplish this reduction of solid waste. The benchmark being curbside pickup. So yet another colored bin to add to our multicolored bins that we have, the green bins and the yellow bins. Who knows what the color of this lid will be. But it'll be another expense for not only the city's bottom line, but also residents, obviously, by increased taxation, almost certainly. So contrast this to the approach of adopting backyard chickens. So not the most common thing that might come to mind, but communities that have promoted backyard chickens have seen dramatic reductions in solid waste. One community that actually tracked this reduction found that for every 24 chickens, they were able to reduce solid waste by 1 ton per year for just 24 chickens. So this is an added benefit to not only city and residents of having zero cost. So you might have a curbside pickup process for this in addition, but it would certainly be a much smaller program, much smaller cost. You might even not need to do it at all to meet the aggressive goals of meeting these standards that are set by the legislation HB 4460. And of course, as an added benefit, you get fresh, free eggs. So for this reason, I do support you adopting this ordinance, 853. There's many other benefits that hopefully be read into the record from my comments that I've sent in previously. I also look forward to this being adopted for the following reasons. One, it'll save taxpayers money. Two, it'll accomplish much of the goals set by Bill 4460. And it'll put Saline in a very nice position as being a forefront in the environmental movement, set us an example for others to follow. So I certainly hope I can get your support on Ordinance 853. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bohr. Appreciate that. There are additional comments on agenda items.
Mary Hess. And although I do agree with the gentleman and Ordinance 853, I wanted to go through a little bit of memory as far as years ago when I was on council. They would not adopt a ordinance on the first reading. It would normally have a reading or two so that the public would see what was being proposed and what cost or good points or bad points, and they were able to have that time to address it. I notice now unless it's an emergency, which would make sense, and that would be passed right away. But I would hope that possibly the council would address it again as far as if it's not an emergency, give it a time for a first reading for people to be able to at least see it and possibly address it if they care. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hess. There are additional citizen comments on agenda items.
Matthew Rockwell. I was addressed by a police officer, several police officers this week, that we, as a city council, want to get rid of our city dispatch. One, I think it's okay to go to Washtenaw County.
Mr. Rockwell, can I stop you?
Yes.
That unfortunately is not an agenda item this evening, so if you'd like to speak to that, that's fine, but we're going to have you do that at the end of tonight's meeting, okay?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. There are additional citizen comments on agenda items. Record reflect there are none from the audience. Clerk Royal, did we receive any written communiques in advance of tonight's meeting?
We received two, but one was from Dr. Bohr, so I will not be reading that one. The other one is from Paul and Megan Martin. It says, "Hello, City Council officials. I was today made aware of a new ordinance being considered to limit the number of chickens to 6 per parcel in the city of Saline. I urge you to reconsider this number. My family currently owns 6 children in the city of Saline and already purchased an order a few weeks ago for 5 more scheduled for delivery. We have a great setup for our chickens and have had absolutely no complaints from our neighbors. Our coop and run is very secure, and as it is a converted playhouse, it is also visually appropriate for our neighborhood. We ordered more pullets, baby hens, in order to fully provide eggs for our family of 6. It is not ideal to raise chickens and still need to purchase store-bought eggs like we are currently. Our current 6 children provide us with 3 to 4 eggs per day, less in the winter. With 4 kids, this does not meet our needs. One of my 13-year-old daughters, we have twins, eats 3 eggs every morning for breakfast alone. When I factor in other uses, I'm still buying 2 to 3 dozen store-bought eggs per week. We are vegetarian and eggs are our main source of protein. If the limit of chickens was raised to 12, this would allow families to fully provide eggs for themselves. If the concern for noise is an issue, I think having a no rooster regulation would be effective enough while allowing up to 12 hens. Hens do make some noise when they lay their eggs. Chicken people call this the egg song. However, at their absolute loudest, they do not come anywhere close to a standard barking dog. As we have 2 hound dogs, much louder than standard, living behind us, I can tell you our entire court area is more concerned with listening to them than our chickens. As far as cleanliness, our coop and run is set up in a way that makes cleaning a breeze. The run floor is a sand base that makes it actually like scooping, raking a large kitty litter. For the coop itself, we have a large door and just rake everything out into a barrel. Smell has never been an issue. Our chickens have brought a lot of joy to our little area of the neighborhood with all the area kids coming to visit. They are excited to meet the new chicks when they arrive and watch them grow. They have been able to learn to care for them and collect their eggs. Our closest neighbors' kids love to hold them as well. They are wonderful pets that also give us food. Chickens are pretty hard to beat. Please reconsider raising the chicken limit to 12. Thank you.
Very good. We do appreciate those comments, but as Mr. Harrington will address when we get to that agenda item, the action taken by Planning Commission 2 weeks ago is to entertain an ordinance that will allow up to 12 chickens. So, but again, we'll address that when we get to that enumerated action item on tonight's agenda. We do appreciate the public comments. One last call. Any citizen comments on agenda items? The record reflect there are no additional comments. Then we proceed to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted. Go ahead, Mr. Rockwell, if you haven't.
I would like to adjust the chicken area.
Okay, yep, that would be fine.
Okay.
You'll have 3 minutes.
I'm for having chickens if you live out in the country. Because one, I live in a condo, and our condo complex will not allow us to do this. One, yes, I worked on a farm for almost so many years. If we're going to do this, then let's be able to have some city farm in the city where we can, one, raise cows, and two, raise all of our food here. Have a field broke down, like Brian, or the one uptown, up near the Ford plant, because we can rotate products there. Two, we can also use the Braun farm and rotate things there, like hay and stuff, and raise horses. Chickens, I think, are great for the city, but the price of them is not right now. I follow the commodities very, very well. So I think you guys need to rethink the chicken idea here in the city of Saline, because a house had it once and they had to get rid of it. That's my opinion. So I will tell you more later on and bring you up to date in a small meeting if you would like to.
Thank you, Mr. Rockwell. If there are no additional citizen comments, then we'll proceed to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for discussion. Moved by CO to approve as submitted. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kamara Sulak. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to unfinished business. First item up is 23-66, council guidelines. Let's start with just a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Manager O'Toole.
Move to acknowledge.
Moved by Dillon. Was that a second by Gearbaugh?
Correct.
Thank you. And this was an issue that City Council discussed at a retreat a couple weeks back. We did make a number of revisions or suggested revisions, so I'll let the city manager go through those, and then perhaps we'll be in a position to entertain a motion to adopt or reconsider at a later date.
Absolutely. So the revisions are included in red in your packet. Very briefly, I'll go through, per that discussion, we presented some guidelines on when or by what time a consent agenda item should be notified for removal. We added some additional language around sending communications to the city manager and the city manager utilizing their discretion for whether follow-up is necessary for all members or just the individual member. And then we added additional language around when it is appropriate to communicate with the city attorney, certainly in any matters of negligence by the city manager or mayor, then that duty falling to the remainder of council. Probably the biggest changes are under the boards and commissions section, where we talked about formalizing the joint annual meeting of all boards and commissions, putting some language around standard formats for reporting and the expectation for when those reports would come, and then the appropriate the appropriate roles for both council liaisons and staff liaisons and their service to those boards and commissions. I will also add that I received one council comment, so not shown on this version, but based on a comment received today, would also be the recommendation to include another item under Section 3, meeting preparation and attendance, that only city-approved devices be utilized during meetings of council.
So would you be looking then to add that and bring it back at a subsequent meeting?
Or we could just approve as amended with that line if it was acceptable.
Okay. Very good. Questions for the city manager? Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, excuse me.
Thank you. As far as devices at the dais, that is as far as like laptops, everyone gets a city-issued laptop and we all use the same ones. And so that's what we're referring to at this point.
Correct. I don't know if anyone receives a city-issued cell phone, but just the laptop then.
Well, my only question is, we all have cell phones up here with us, and I have my cell phone with me in the event that I need to communicate with my daughter, who's sometimes home alone.
So that, I think we're talking about difference between something being present and something being used. So utilized during would be what you're accessing information off of.
Okay. As long as it's not an issue if I need to.
Yeah, I think that's clearly described in the electronics policy that's been previously adopted. You know, if you need to have information, like a personal phone for emergencies, absolutely, that would not be, yeah.
Just for full disclosure, I don't have a city-issued laptop or tablet. I generally will print off or review at my desktop material in advance of a council meeting. There are occasions, albeit very rare, and if the guideline prohibits this, I will cease the behavior. But there are times where I will look up things on the city website or in the packet on my cell phone.
Yeah, I mean, it's really council's discretion if they want to include that language or clarify it further.
Do you have additional questions, Councilmember?
As far as that topic is concerned, I don't know if there's any others that had questions about that or not. If not, I'll go ahead.
I just want to clarify, because that does mean that that device being used is potentially open to FOIA.
Correct.
And the other issue I wanted to ask about was Section 7, which is the boards and commissions. We added a bunch of new language. We've also now kind of created this new committee. So I didn't know whether or not, and I apologize for not bringing this up, it didn't really dawn on me until I was looking at my calendar before the meeting that we were meeting tomorrow on the boards and commission committee. So I wasn't sure whether you wanted to wait for input from that for this, or if.
I mean, I think for the purpose of establishing these guidelines, just the fact that we're stipulating that an annual meeting will be held is probably sufficient. We don't really need to get in, my personal opinion is we don't really need to get into the details of what then comes out of the recommendations of that. I think we're calling it a task force or a working group. So, yeah, really once the agenda is created using that working group, that will be an event that exists in perpetuity, and I'm signing Terry up, but probably something that would be coordinated through the clerk's office annually.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Additional questions regarding the proposed guidelines? Okay, then we have a motion on the floor to acknowledge receipt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to adopt or not to adopt the 2023 council guidelines as presented?
Motion to adopt as presented.
Moved by Rice to...
Do we want as presented or as amended with that one?
Well, I would defer to the mover. Do you want the additional language about...
Yes, motion to adopt as amended.
Okay, very good. That motion is in order. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Dillon. Is there any additional discussion on the motion? Mr. Gearbaugh.
Again, these are guidelines, correct? So
Correct. These are guidelines. It's really just what we're all agreeing is going to be the standard operating procedure.
Any additional discussion? Go ahead, Mr. Seal.
It's what?
Say again?
The amendment, again, would you please?
Do you want to restate the amendment? It's about
Absolutely.
not prohibiting, but discouraging use of a personal device during a meeting.
So under Section 3, there would be a line added, only city-approved devices should be utilized during meetings of council.
Can you send a clean copy of this subsequent to
Absolutely,
tonight's
yes,
meeting?
yep.
Okay, assuming it passes. Very good. Anything else, Mr. Seal?
No, sir.
Okay. Any subsequent discussion? There we have a motion on the floor moved by Rice, seconded by Dillon to adopt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to unfinished business item 23-70. This is special event policy revised. This will be a motion to approve or not to approve the revised special events policy.
Move to approve.
Moved by Del Orco to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Rice. City Manager, are you kicking this off, or are we deferring it to the city clerk?
I can kick it off, and then Clerk Royal can add anything. So this is in response to two specific issues. These changes are responding to what happens in the event that a special event is approved for waivers, and the waiver is in excess of what's approved, and also making reference to the environmental guidelines that were presented to us at a previous meeting. I will also note I did receive some comments on this, and if adopted tonight, I would also add the change to Section 3D that references a Section 4. It should reference Section 3. And under...
So that change can be made without objection.
Yeah. And then under, sorry, I got to find this other one.
That's just a typo, essentially.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Non-substantive change.
So then under Section 7, the last sentence reads, "Some roads cannot be closed due to fire or safety issues." This would be changed, "cannot be closed due to fire, safety, or construction issues."
That change can also be made without objection. Okay. Very good. Clerk Royal, anything you'd like to add? Questions for city administration? Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, and then Mr. Gearbock.
Thank you. I did just have two quick questions that I did ask the city manager about earlier. Under the fees for special events, when we talk about third-party fees, which is like Porta Johns, hand washing stations and such, that we are basically renting on behalf of an organization, and then we get reimbursed for them. And what I had asked for was what happens if those are damaged, destroyed, lost, who is responsible for them at that point, because if we are the actual contractee, then it would actually be us, and then we'd need to make sure that there was language in whatever the agreement is that say the people are responsible for anything. And so that's one part of it, so I'll say.
Yeah, so in responding to that, I did not have an opportunity to connect with DPW Manager Anderson, but if it is not possible to just do the direct connection to like a preferred vendor or like a listed vendor, we would add a line in the applications moving forward to clarify, check, and initial that you are responsible for any damage to third-party rentals.
Okay, thank you. Because the second part of that was that, do we really need to be in the middle of rentals? Could that just be an agreement between the event and the contractor? Do we need to?
And that is something I would like to take up with DPW staff, just to understand better where that process arose from and why. If it's as simple as, well, we want to make sure it's placed in the right location, I think we have the resources now to more clearly delineate using GIS maps exactly where things can be placed and can't be placed.
So would it make sense then, I'm sorry to cut you off, would it make sense then to get clarification from DPW on that point and then bring this back at a subsequent meeting for approval? Because I tend to agree with my colleague. On the surface, unless I'm presented with some alternative information, it would seem reasonable to remove us from that scenario.
Yeah, I don't see any issue with that. I mean, there's nothing pressing about adopting these changes, so we could certainly get more information about how that third-party relationship works and bring this back.
Okay, very good. Anything else, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon?
No, there was a question that I had asked, but I think she and I had worked it through whether items were consumables or reusables.
Yeah.
Like things that we pay for.
Very good. Mr. Gearbock, you still have a question?
Yeah, just a quick clarification on the adoption of the recycle trash guidelines. Again, these are just guidelines, there's no requirements. How do we handle enforcement or anything, or is there not going to be that?
Since they're just guidelines, there's really not going to be enforcement. I mean, the enforcement mechanism, so to speak, is council's discretion to approve an event or to approve waivers. If you ever feel like an event doesn't align with the mission and vision of the community, you have the right to either not approve or certainly not grant waivers.
I just wanted to make sure, because there was a recommendation about using a specific vendor, and I didn't know what that included, so, thank you.
Additional questions? We do have a motion on the floor, but if the body deems fit, we could always postpone to a date certain.
Move to postpone to a date certain?
That motion will take precedence over the one that's on the floor. Are you moving to postpone to the date certain being our next regular meeting, which would be April 3rd?
As long as the city manager.
Yeah, there's no issue with that, yes.
Gives you 2 weeks, okay? Motion to postpone to date certain of April 3rd. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Seconded by CO. Is there any discussion on the motion to postpone? Okay, then this will appear as an unfinished business item at our next regular meeting. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 23-71, ordinance number 853, pet ownership in residential districts. This will be a motion to adopt or not to adopt ordinance number 853 to amend Apex A, Article 5, Sections 5.13.
Move to acknowledge.
Moved by
Second.
Dillon to acknowledge, and that was seconded by Gearbaugh. Thank you both. Mr. Harrington, would you like to begin? And then since this was discussed and there was a pretty robust, not debate, but I guess discussion at our most recent Planning Commission meeting, I'll defer to Mr. Gearbaugh for some additional thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I can start by saying that the reason there's not a second hearing is because the public hearing for this ordinance was held at the Planning Commission meeting earlier this month. So I believe that was the newly still discussed council policies document that I last saw related to how
That was just adopted, so it's official
sorry,
now.
I missed that part. So, yes.
And also for clarification, it was also discussed at a prior public meeting, the Code Review Committee, correct?
That is correct. But unlike those, the public hearing, which is a formally noticed thing that we have to go through, was part of the Planning Commission meeting.
But the public is free to attend and welcome to attend any Code Review Committee meeting.
That is correct.
Yeah, very good.
So essentially, the genesis of this ordinance is that we started out by finding that chickens were inadvertently cut from pets that could be kept in residential districts years ago. It did not seem like that was the council's intent when they last modified pet ownership in residential districts, but it was a fatality of that ordinance change, so to speak. So the goal in the crafting this ordinance was to do it relatively quickly and not to be redundant or additionally restrictive compared to how we handle other pets. And I'll just add that importantly, our rabid, dangerous animals, nuisances that might result from noise or waste, at-large animals if the chicken leaves the property, et cetera, they all have the same rules that any of our other animals in the community would. It was definitely a discussion at Planning Commission on how new density standards in the future would potentially affect chicken keeping. But suffice to say, we could always move to exempt more dense lots from this action. And we also don't necessarily regulate how well people keep the pets that we do allow them to have already, such as dogs, cats, or fish. So that was definitely a part of that Planning Commission discussion. To get into the meat of the ordinance, the proposed code sets a limit at 12, which was based off a substantive and informative discussion at the Planning Commission that Mayor Marl and Mr. Gearbaugh can definitely speak to. The ordinance generally regulates the coops, the storing of feed or similar, and it's all similar to other communities that we reviewed in the process of creating this ordinance. And again, we didn't want to create more work for staff on what I would really consider a non-contentious issue. And then importantly here, the real meat of the mechanics of the ordinance and how staff will apply it is that the rules surrounding chicken coops they follow the same size, height, and setback standards as other detached accessory structures. So if someone put a shed, put a patio, put a garage, they all fall under the same standards. We did note that there was a misreporting of this earlier, so if the public was confused, there is a semantic confusion. We are not necessarily permitting these structures in the same way we would permit a new garage, for example, so long as they're not pouring a new concrete patio. If it's a freestanding wooden structure on their own property, it just has to meet our setback and size standards, but it is not a $75 permit application like it would be for a patio or for a garage. And then lastly, like I said, that was a deliberate decision on the Planning Commission's part, and my part, to not overly burden that as a regulation, and then just as it relates to chickens in general, not trying to permit people, not trying to overly regulate or reinvent the wheel here, as it seems like it's a relatively straightforward and easy pet keeping process. So
very good. Mr. Gearbaugh, any perspective from the Planning Commission?
Mr. Harrison handled most of it. The only one concern we had was discussion of the 6 to 12 chickens. Originally proposed was the limit of 6 chickens. As the discussion and feedback came into us from individuals in the audience at that meeting, it was felt that that was an appropriate number. One other solution was the idea of using it a special land use, allowing for more chickens. And most of the planning, actually, I think all of planning agreed that that was not a route that we wanted to go that would allow to have even more chickens than that. So they agreed upon and compromised the idea that up to 12 chickens. Doesn't mean that everybody's going to have 12 chickens, but you would be allowed by right to have 12 chickens. And again, as stated, any of those issues as to odor, noise, concerns are all reinforceable based on the current code. So if 12 chickens are making too much noise or an issue, then it will be addressed as need be.
Yeah, I thought at our most recent Planning Commission meeting, one, obviously our decision benefited from public comment that we received, at the meeting and also in writing. I thought it was a very respectful, robust discussion, trying to work through this issue and broach a reasonable compromise that would benefit our residents and property owners. And as was noted in your packet, the solution to not allow for special land use and to permit up to 12 with other clear and unambiguous regulations was unanimously adopted and approved by the members present. I think there was one absent, so it was a unanimous decision. I think the solution is good, more than reasonable, and I will be voting in favor, in the affirmative, when a subsequent motion is offered. At this time, I would be happy to entertain questions from council members. Mayor Pro Tem Dillon.
Thank you. So I guess what I would like to see, it's not necessarily the number of chickens, but how it correlates to the size of the property. Is there a way to do that? Because if you've got a larger piece, then I can see where you've got a little bit more room. If you're in close quarters with your neighbors and you have a very small yard, it seems as though, have you seen that in any of the other communities?
I have not seen that, so there's two things here. So A, the size requirements refer back to our accessory structure standards, which do actually correlate to lot size. So that's subject to change with our accessory dwelling unit ordinance, which should be coming to you in the coming month or so. But I imagine that, yes, you could make the argument that de facto, because the size of the coop is related to the size of the detached accessory structure allowed, which is related to the size of a lot, it already accomplishes that. I would also add that this was a point of discussion that we had at the Planning Commission meeting, but as I mentioned, there was a feeling that we don't necessarily regulate the size of a yard that you have to have as a dog owner. So if you have a big greyhound, you don't necessarily have to have an acre of land. You could live in an apartment with that dog. So I think there was the conversation of fairness and equity surrounding whether or not it was fair to regulate chicken owners more heavily as a result of that. But fundamentally, it's a policy question. But yes, you could do that if you were really interested in it.
But fundamentally, if you had a dog, you could walk it outside of your property. You could take it to another property. A chicken, you're not necessarily going to be leaving the property.
No, I understand. Like I said, it's fundamentally a policy question. I'm just repeating what the
So
Planning Commission
that
ordered.
was just one of the things. And then the other piece that I'm trying to figure out, is it a matter of the yard is fenced, or do you have to have a special coop run fence?
So you could have a fence that's a small portion of your yard that covers the coop area or wherever you would like the chickens to roam freely if you're having them walk about your yard. But we're indifferent if it's the entire yard or if it's a section of your yard.
Okay, and then when we talk about fencing, is there a standard to the fencing?
Yep, so our ordinance specifically says here, requirements of section 7.03. So it refers back to our own fencing and screening standards.
Okay, so I appreciate that. And
That's
then-
subsection G of our point 4.
I'll look that up.
Sorry.
So then, there's just two other things about this then. First, can HOAs limit, can they say we do not allow chickens within an HOA?
Yeah, that was also a part of one of the other public comments surrounded that, and that was a part of the Planning Commission presentation on this topic as well. We have no regulation over the HOAs. If an HOA wants to forbid you having a fence, for example, that would necessarily prevent you from having chickens. And then, yes, an HOA could otherwise also just prohibit the keeping of chickens in their HOA. That's outside of the city's control.
Okay. And then just two more really quick points. As far as the second reading, I understand what we've agreed on. This is one of those topics where I do feel as though a second reading could be beneficial. We don't ever put out information really about our planning commissions. We don't advertise them on social media the way we do for council meetings and such. And since this is something that could potentially impact all residents, it's not a matter of a zoning issue or such. I do feel like I'd like to give the public the opportunity to sort of weigh in on their comments about it. That's just my feeling about it. And lastly, as we consider an ordinance for chickens, I mean, should our next step be, should we look at bees and beekeeping and that sort of thing also, as, where we limit how many bees you're allowed to have on a property and where they're allowed to be on a property?
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. This one was definitely brought by public interest in an issue found in our code. So It started with a code enforcement aspect where we identified that chickens were not allowed in the community, but we were aware of several properties in the community that already owned chickens. And we weren't effectively going to take those chickens away. It was not ever the intent or the idea. So it was a matter of creating an ordinance. But if you are aware of avid beekeepers, if you think that we should adopt an ordinance surrounding beekeeping, because right now I would say that it would be prohibited based on our code, I'm happy to look into that and also write a bee ordinance in addition to the.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, is that it's sort of, the bees and the chickens sort of went hand in hand of, we didn't really had anything that addressed them, so it was like, so does that mean they are allowed or they're not allowed?
So the rule on that is called specific enumeration. So if we have items such as animals in this case, so it's small animals, marine fish, domesticated dogs, and household cats, if we specifically enumerate something that is allowed, and we had every ability and every option to add other animals to that and chose not to, the interpretation from legal counsel is that then it would not be allowed. So yes, effectively bees would not be allowed and chickens would not be allowed based on that general rule of thumb. But obviously what actually occurs is different. Like for example, as part of this code too, we're also supposed to give a special license to people who own more than a combination of 3 dogs and cats, but that's not something the city necessarily has ever gone out of its way to enforce.
And then speaking of enforcement, should a resident have an issue, what does that process look like? How do they file a complaint?
So they contact the building department, either a code enforcement officer or myself or the building official. We enter it into our system that there was a complaint, and then we send somebody out as soon as we can to investigate the complaint to see what grounds there were to it. With chicken keeping and animals at large, it's a little more of a challenging gray area, but it's nothing that we haven't seen before, essentially. So we would then issue a courtesy notice to that property owner and let them know that they were in violation of our code. They would have 2 weeks to fix it. Like I said, with an at-large animal, it's a little bit different, but should a second offense occur and then a third offense, that's when you move into potentially issuing a civil infraction for repeatedly violating the city's ordinance. But obviously that's never our intent. We prefer to lead through the courtesy notice process and the enforcement process as much as we can before we ever consider ticketing a resident.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for the information.
Mr. Gearbo, did you have a point you wanted to make?
I did, but I can't.
Okay, not a big deal.
Can't remember.
I'm going to come back to you if you recall. Additional questions for city staff? Okay, we have a motion on the floor moved by Dillon, seconded by Gearboss, simply to acknowledge receipt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to adopt or not to adopt ordinance number 853 to amend Apex A, Article 5, Section 5.13?
Motion to adopt?
Moved by Commissioner Sulak to adopt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Rice. Is there any additional discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor of adopting, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 23-72, RBC gearbox purchase. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from Superintendent Briggs and to approve or not to approve the purchase of RBC gearbox from WC Ducobe in a price not to exceed $29,600.
To acknowledge and approve.
Moved by CO to acknowledge and to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Del Orco. Mr. Briggs, do you care to make a brief comment for the record?
Certainly. So in the past, we've had 2 of these gearboxes on hand for spares for the RBCs. And as we know, it's probably going to be a couple of years before we can take them out of service. And we used a spare this last summer to replace one that was pretty much destroyed itself. And the last one is going to be put on the repaired gear RBC. So this is to order another spare to have on the shelf.
Seems very reasonable. Questions for Superintendent Briggs? Mayor Pro Tem Dillon?
Thank you. Mr. Briggs, just a quick question. What is the shipping cost?
It's, did I not get that changed? It was, the shipping cost is about $800, but
Okay.
the cost for that is the total including the shipping.
Okay, so it's still less than the other ones. So did you feel confident with this vendor? It's not just the
They're
lowest
all
bid?
buying them from Dodge, the same company.
Okay,
So,
same
yeah,
product.
it's somebody's charging more and somebody's charging less.
Good to know. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Additional questions for Mr. Briggs? Bill, thank you. Hang tight, though, because you're up on deck for the next motion.
Certainly.
Any subsequent discussion on this issue? Properly moved by CO, seconded by Del Orco to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 23-73, valve replacement for green sand filters. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from Superintendent Briggs and to approve or not to approve the purchasing replacement of valves for $103,050 from Midwest Power Systems and authorize, not authorize, the city treasurer to amend line item 591-555-931000.
Move to acknowledge, approve, and to authorize.
Moved by Gearbox to acknowledge, to approve, and to authorize. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by CO. Again, Mr. Briggs, do you care to make a brief obligatory statement for the record?
Certainly, as you know, we've replaced 4 of these valves already because they were leaking. And so my guess is that the rest of them are not very far behind. And we do have some other valves that we believe are leaking, allowing water to go back to a compressor tank. So I just figure it's a good time. If we get these ordered now, hopefully we'll have them on hand for the time we do the green sand replacement in the filters, and we can kind of coordinate one filter down, change the valves while it's down.
Because this is your vocation and area of expertise, how long do these valves normally last? What's the lifespan?
Well, they'll last quite a long time, but we may find that there are other valves that are leaking that may make it difficult to actually do the green sand replacement and any painting inside, because you don't know that they're leaking because they're leaking inside the tank as opposed to where these others were leaking out to a drain.
Gotcha. Okay, very good. Questions for Superintendent Briggs, Mr. Seal?
Yes, I counted up, did you enumerate 20 of these valves?
I believe that's close. Yeah, I couldn't tell you right off the top of my head, but yeah, there's several that are 10-inch, several that are 6-inch, some that are 4-inch.
Yeah.
So there's several varieties.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I had that count right. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Seal. Additional questions? No? Okay. Bill, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Is there any subsequent discussion on the motion? It's been properly moved by Gearbox, seconded by CO to acknowledge, to approve, and to authorize. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Moving on to new business item 23-74, POLC hybrid retirement plan. This will be a motion to approve or not to approve the MERS POLC hybrid plan agreement and MERS addendum for closures, freezes, and conversions, to close POLC defined contribution division.
Move to acknowledge.
Okay, start by a simple motion to acknowledge by
Second.
Gearbaugh and seconded by Kamara Sulak. Assistant City Manager Getzman, please.
So this was already discussed. I was not at the last meeting, but it's part of the police officers' new contract. These are just the agreements to create the new hybrid division for them and then close out the old DC division. Anyone who wants to stay in there can, but there will have a one-time opportunity to transfer. And I think just the important thing is that we hope this will be a good recruiting tool for new, younger officers, something attractive to come here. So, and we'll also achieve parity with staff and T-POM by doing this, so.
Excellent. Very good. City Manager O'Toole, anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I will add, since our last conversation, we have finalized all the contract language. The only thing we'll need to do is just clean up the page numbers, so everything is finalized with that agreement without any changes, substantive changes to what was previously presented. So with this action, we should really be wrapping up that entire process and moving forward.
Excellent. Questions for the Assistant City Manager or City Manager regarding this issue? Mr. Gearbaugh.
Just real quick, so when you mentioned our contract and everything, cleanup, there's just minor changes, nothing else?
No, nothing substantive.
Just basically page numbers, isn't it?
That'll be the last remaining item. So the recommended language changes that I presented were accepted.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify. I understand there's been some confusion on that from other individuals, so I wanted to hear that from you. Thank you.
Mr. Seal, you had a question?
Yes, sir. What exactly is the hybrid model?
So, sure, the hybrid model is both a defined benefit and defined contribution. So the employee can contribute whatever they like to the defined contribution side, but the employer only contributes to the defined benefit. So in lieu of the traditional pension that was just the defined benefit that the employer only paid, this is kind of that compromise that arose out of the financial crisis to still create a living benefit for retirees, but at a substantially lower cost to communities.
Okay.
Additional questions? Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just a statement. Again, this is where I previously asked that we somehow adopt a guideline in terms of how we address these MERS plans going in the future, in terms of how multipliers are changed or any of that thing. So I had mentioned that to Treasurer Cole, and we'll get back to working on that at some point.
Yeah, I think on that point, a resolution affirming sort of what our standard is going to be in terms of what is an acceptable multiplier would be extremely valuable.
Yeah, and I will say, for this, the PULC contract specifically, this actual addendum will be included in that contract. So it would also need to be changed as part of any actual contract process. It couldn't be changed outside of it.
Yep, fine by me. If there are no additional questions, we do have a motion on the floor moved by Gearboss, seconded by Commander Sulek to acknowledge. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to approve or not to approve?
Move to approve.
Moved by Del Orco to approve and seconded by Gearbaugh. Is there any additional discussion on the motion? Okay, there is none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to the last new business item, which is 23-75, Special Assessment Resolution Number 1 for the Saline Area Fire Department. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Treasurer Cole and to adopt or not to adopt Resolution Number 2374, Fire Protection Special Assessment District.
Move to approve and adopt.
Acknowledge and to
Acknowledge.
adopt, okay. Moved by Gearbough to acknowledge and adopt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by, I'll let Rice be the second on that one. I'll get you on the next one, Mr. Delorco. Treasurer Cole, do you care to make a brief comment on this?
Yes, good evening. The Saline Area Fire Department obviously provides very essential and vital services to the city of Saline. This year, costs went up to the city 5%, totaling in $668,000 approximately. This requires us to levy the full mill, and that still requires an additional contribution of about $127,000 from general fund.
Very good.
Okay.
Questions for City Treasurer Cole? I know this is a matter we have discussed previously. Mayor Pro Tem Dillon.
Thank you. It's not actually for, I think it's for the city manager. Just to clarify, on the agenda, we call this Resolution 23-74. In the memo, it says Resolution Number 1.
Yeah, so we would be calling it 22-74, so we can make that note when you adopt. The specific motion is Resolution Number 22-74.
There are 3 resolutions that go with it.
So that's the title is Resolution 1, but the actual resolution itself is 22 dash, yeah,
Okay.
or 23 dash.
I'm sorry, I did that because it's easier for me to keep up with which ones you approved.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions?
No, not at all.
Okay. Thank you, City Treasurer Cole. Any discussion on the motion? It's been properly moved by Gearboss, seconded by Rice to adopt, to acknowledge, and to adopt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to the discussion portion of tonight's agenda. First up is Commission, Committee, and Task Force reports from council members. I'll start to my left and then to my right. Councilmember Rice, any Commission, Committee, or Task Force reports?
Yes. Just a moment. Sorry. The Historic District met. We are going to have, we're setting up a time in early spring to have someone come out and discuss the benefits of restoration of wood windows in your historic house. So we'll have something set up hopefully at the farmer's market. We're still in the works on how exactly that's going to work, but look for that in, once the farmer's market is set up outside downtown in early spring, probably sometime in May. We do also have 3 vacancies, so I will start a social media campaign and hopefully work with Sarah Massey as well, our city's PR generalist, to get some folks on board. But I'm going to go door to door in my neighborhood. We have a lot of new folks in the historic district, and I would also encourage folks who are not within the historic district to apply to become members of this commission, especially if you have substantial interest in historic districts or expertise in construction or rehabilitation. We can really use folks with some of those skills on our commission.
Very good. Mr. Delorco, any Commission, Committee, or Task Force reports?
Not at this time.
Mr. Gearbaugh.
This week, Planning Commission will meet on Wednesday to discuss the auxiliary unit change to the ordinance, potential change with a public hearing at that point. And then also, we're going to be able to define the
Quasi-public facility.
Thank you. Which is like churches and those type of things, which we currently don't have a definition of that nature.
Very good. Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, any Commission, Committee, or Task Force reports?
Thank you. Not much to report out on, just Zoning Board of Appeals has not received any appeals requests lately, so we have not met. The Saline Fire Board will be meeting on April 5th. That is also a meeting that's open to the public. It is held next door at the firehouse. The Cable Commission will be meeting April 11th. It always meets the second Tuesday of the month. It meets during the day. We welcome feedback for those of you within the city that have Comcast and have access to the Comcast community channel. We appreciate if you could tune in at times, let us know how it's going. We really need some feedback as far as programming content and just the quality of the sound and such on it. And I was able to attend the Saline Township monthly meetings for Andalina Farms, which is the development on the west side of town, and that is progressing. They have just, now that they have frost restrictions that have been lifted, they are back to building homes.
Very good. Mr. CEO, any Commissioner Task Force reports?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Just wanted to report out what City Clerk Terry Royal had reported to the Cemetery Board, and that's progress made by DPW on the mausoleum. In order to get the mausoleum finally painted, it was required that we wanted to have electricity installed such that we could run a dehumidifier in there to reduce the humidity within the mausoleum itself, which is causing paint to blister. So the electricity's been installed, the dehumidifier has been purchased and installed, and it's operating away very happily now, dehumidifying the mausoleum.
Excellent. That is good news. Thank you for that. Mr. Commander Sulak, any Commission, Committee, or Task Force reports?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. The DEI Committee is hosting a book discussion this Thursday at Liberty School, 7 o'clock. Eloquent Rage. So please sign up or just swing on by at 7 o'clock on Thursday. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Let's transition now to reports or other announcements.
I actually would like to announce to the community that we have received a few instances, as the mayor and the city manager know, of brown water over the last couple of days and the last week as well. I want to reiterate to the community that we do have a reporting tool and that it's really essential to use the reporting tool, and it's not just so that we can dismiss your report. It's so that we can pinpoint where the problem is. I found this very helpful 2 summers ago when my house was one of the most flagrant reporters of brown water, and it turns out there was a valve that wasn't open somewhere, and it's been resolved near my house for the most part. So please report it to the city when you see brown water. Feel free to complain over Facebook as well. I understand the frustration. I was very frustrated with it as well. Laundry gets ruined. The water is gross. But when you're on your computer, please also report it through the city reporting tool.
And just a reminder that we are beginning flushing activities, so discoloration is normal during that process. We'll try to do our best to report out what progress we're making as we go through the flushing map.
Yeah, one suggestion I would make, I apologize if I'm cutting you off, Councilmember Rice, is similar to what we did this last year, when we begin our comprehensive spring flushing, if we could sort of denote what geographic areas we're working in, I thought that was particularly helpful for businesses and residents, because to me, it's simple dot connecting. If DPW was in your neighborhood flushing, there's probably going to be, for a finite period of time, some cloudy, discolored water and maybe a decline in water pressure.
Absolutely, yeah, we can work with PR journalist Massey to get something out.
Very good. Anything else, Councilmember Rice?
That's all. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Delorco, any reports or announcements?
Nothing at this time.
Mr. Gearbaugh?
I would like to let everyone know we had the Councilmember Rice and Mayor Pro Tem Dillon and myself had the opportunity to attend the coffee hour discussion with our Congresswoman Dingell and members of the state legislature, where they provided some information regarding some of the items that are going up or that are occurring. Interestingly enough, one of them was, of course, our concerns about DTE, and fortunately, they were giving some information which, of course, the concerns and the hearing panels that are happening up in Lansing right now to determine what can be done in terms of addressing the power outages and things that have occurred. And also, there was a discussion regarding the concern with waste disposal in terms of what was coming out of East Palatine, Ohio, that can actually come to us because EPA has authority over our state, allowing it to be treated in, where was it?
Romulus, I'm sure.
Romulus, I think it is. So one of the concerns that came out of that, though, was actually talking about the issue is that we have the lowest tipping fees in the country, and so everybody wants to dump into Michigan because we have that. And one of the issues is that needing to address that at some point we need to make it less an incentive to take trash into our community. So that was actually very worthwhile attendance for us, and I think some of the information was gathered that they want to continue to have these type of meetings, and that we all three jumped right into it and wanted to volunteer Saline as being one of the next locations if they want to have, and especially since we have a larger facility in which we can hold a meeting. And then the only other thing I want to mention, again, in the consent agenda tonight was the annual report for the Historical Society. I want to mention we just held our recent elections, and we have a new president, treasurer, and vice president. Stephanie Custer will be the new president. Scott Runschler will be the new vice president, and Miley Weberline will be the treasurer/secretary. I hope you all, if you get a chance to come out to farm, whatever, can congratulate them on their new roles, and they're looking forward to continuing the success we've had in this past year. Thank you.
Very good. That's a great slate of officers, and thank you to you specifically, Mr. Gearbaugh, for your time and tenure as president of that group. I think they made tremendous progress under your leadership, so thank you for that service. I have 4 announcements. One, in keeping with statements I've made at previous meetings on the April 3rd agenda, there should be on the consent portion a motion to establish a charter review committee. There will also be, as part of the consent agenda, a motion to establish a working committee to finalize details and create an agenda for a joint Saline Area School Board City Council meeting. Also an item that we discussed and I messaged on in my weekly communique on Friday. I did have an excellent conversation, coffee with Michael McVeigh, the president of the school board, last Wednesday. We agreed that there's great value in having a joint meeting at a neutral location and developing a pretty comprehensive, robust agenda of community-related items. So again, they'll be appointing probably 2 people from the school district. We'll appoint 2 from the city of Saline to organize said meeting, and we anticipate likely hosting something in late May or early June. The last thing I wanted to report out, actually 2 other things. Councilmember Rice made reference of vacancies on the Historic District Commission. There are vacancies on other boards. We are always accepting applications for board and commissions. It's a great way to get involved. If you believe in this community and you want to make it better, you want to see it progress, serving on one of our local boards and commissions is a great way to do that. And if we can't accommodate you, we keep those applications on file for a couple years. There have been many instances during my tenure where people have submitted a board application and something comes up in 6 months a year, and we're able to engage them and plug that vacancy, plug that hole, which is great. And then last, I want to thank my colleagues for updating and revising letters to our federal elected officials regarding our wastewater treatment grant request. And I would also note to the public, we strongly encourage residents and business owners, community stakeholders to also make phone calls, send emails, or hard letters to Senators Stabenow, Peters, and Congresswoman Dingell, urging them to approve a $5 million grant request we have to rehabilitate our wastewater treatment plant. I'll also note, because City Manager O'Toole and I, she met with Senator Irwin, both of us met with State Representative Brabeck. We will likely have a specific request through the state of Michigan, through the state legislature, sometime in the next couple months as well. So at that point, I'll request additional letters from City Council, and then I would also humbly ask that our constituents, our business owners, also reach out to Senator Irwin's office, Representative Brabeck's office, and probably Governor Whitmer as well. That's it for me. Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, reports or other announcements?
Just one, I want to kind of follow up on what Councilmember Rice had mentioned about utilizing our reporting tool. It's also a great avenue for reporting lights that are out, street lights. There have been several of them out lately, and DT only knows about it if we tell them. So if you use a reporting tool, there is a specific drop down that says report light outages. And all it requires is, some lights do have like a 6-digit code on them. If you just give a general proximity, the address in which the light is in front of, that usually is enough for them to find it. because the lights do provide a safety mechanism in our community. And so just understanding that if the lights are out, please report them.
Very good. Mr. Seal, any reports or announcements?
None, Your Honor.
Mr. Kamir Sulak?
None, Your Honor.
Easy enough. Then we come to the second public comment period. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested, but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. We'll begin with those in the audience. You will have 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time and your patience with us tonight. My name's Eddie Roberts. I'm the operations manager at Big George's Home Appliance Mart. A little over 2 years ago, we moved into the old Jack Products building, and we run our warehouse from there. We dispatch about 40 vehicles a day, delivery and install. Some of you may have seen our showroom before in Ann Arbor on Stadium. We also have a store in West Bloomfield, which we drive to daily with these vehicles. And we have a store in Petoskey, which we bring products from our warehouse here in Saline up to the Petoskey area in delivery. We're really excited about our growth, and we're happy to work here in this community with you. Our move into the new building was not easy, but you all worked with us very well, and we got through it, and we got our certificate of occupancy, and so we're really happy to be operating out of there. We deliver and install high-end appliances. We're in direct competition with the big box stores like Lowe's, Home Depot, Menards, Best Buy. Our purpose for tonight's visit is that we would like to put fuel tanks on site. We overburden the local gas stations in the morning with about 20 to 40 vehicles trying to fill up. We're looking and proposing to have a 1,000-gallon diesel gas tank on site and a 500-gallon unleaded fuel tank on site. We've been working with the city. We've gone back and forth a few times. It seems like when we meet some requirement, a new requirement appears in front of us. We're unclear as to why these requirements keep popping up with us, and it keeps getting harder to do this. So I've done some investigation on your local businesses that are using these fuel tanks. The Department of Public Works has a 1,000-gallon fuel tank on a concrete slab in your city. I believe the Forcia plant has a fuel tank on site on a concrete slab. Some of these are protected by concrete barriers or pillars so they don't get run over and have a huge explosion. Some of these are not. I believe there's also one at the wastewater treatment plant on a concrete pad. So we've been working with Steve and a little bit of Ben about what are they going to require us to the infrastructure for these tanks. And as it stands currently, it looks like a $70,000 project with concrete walls, a drainage system. This is Jim, by the way. He's from Corrigan Oil. He does this every day. Their company comes and fills your fuel tanks here for your city. They will soon be filling ours. But he's never seen this kind of requirements. And all I'm asking for tonight is a review of what you're asking of us compared to what you are doing yourselves within the city for your fuel tanks. And see if we can come to a compromise so I can work closer with him and get these tanks on site and have an infrastructure that isn't so complicated. He can attest to the complexity of the infrastructure that you're asking us to build, and we totally want to make sure that we meet the state requirements and your requirements.
Very good. Thank you for those comments.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I'll briefly address them at the conclusion of tonight's second public comment period.
Sure.
Thank you, Eddie. Yep.
I'm with Corrigan along with Ramsey.
You'll have another 3 minutes if you'd like it.
Just want to add to that. We set thousands of tanks all over the state of Michigan. We go by the state codes of LARA. Certainly the city of Saline can override that and do whatever they want to do for safety. We understand that. We'll work with Mr. Harrington over this. Over a year ago, actually March 3rd of 22, we submitted stamped engineered drawings just to set fuel tanks per Steve Masiak, even though there's no building. It's just a slab with bollards, as Mr. Roberts spoke to. That's all we would like to do. Exact same as DPW has, exact same as your wastewater treatment plant, 20 by 20 slab surrounded by bollards. Same situation they want to set up here, nothing different than the city of Saline is doing with their own fuel tanks, which Corrigan also fuels. We'd just like the same treatments from the city to help one of your residences, and Mr. Burchard and Big George stay in Saline and be able to fuel his trucks that way. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. There are additional citizen comments this evening. Again, you can speak to any issue that is on your mind, but you will be limited to 3 minutes.
Mary Hess. Well, thank you, Ms. Dillon, for trying to at least get a second reading on the ordinance 853. I don't think it was anything that was monumental as far as emergency. And I remember working very hard to have council meetings videotaped and put on cable so people could stay home and watch them. I don't think planning commission meetings are televised.
Yes, they are.
They are?
They are.
Okay, I stand corrected. But I think that what we're saying, and the council is telling me, what I hear is that it's my responsibility and the taxpayers' responsibility to come to the meetings. You should come to the code meeting, you should come to the planning commission, and also council to see what's going on in case there's something you wanted to address. I still think it's an important thing as far as an ordinance. I know the council is boss, but to let the people they represent know what is being proposed, I do not think it is out of line to have the courtesy of a second reading. Thank you.
Additional citizen comments this evening.
Matthew Rockwell. I am in favor of I was addressed by several colleagues of your police department that Washtenaw County and state want to take over the police department. I am fine with that. I do not mind getting rid of our Saline Police Department and having Washtenaw County come out here and run our county since they own half of it. So I think that would be good on you guys. Also, I want to address the chickens. One, that is wrong as heck. I worked on a farm all the way up to the 2008 recession. If we're going to do it, then you got to have a big, big farm to raise these things because it takes time. You have to have a skid loader and everything. Or why don't we just turn in to some of the places that are empty, a farm where we can milk cows and have a committee of farmers from the FFA over at the high school, the students that run FFA, and the alumni that run the FFA, if that's what you guys would like to do. I'm not opposed to raising chickens. You can go down to you can go right down to Tractor Supply Company, buy your friggin' chicken, and raise it at home. So that's where I stand on that one.
Thank you, Mr. Rockwell. Are there any additional citizen comments this evening from those in the audience?
And thank you very much for keeping this as a heated place when we did not have heat, because up in that area,
You lost power.
We lost power for over 2.5 weeks. And this was a nice place to come and bring a pillow and a blanket and fall asleep in here. I'm saying thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Matthew. Would you like 3 minutes, please?
Good evening. My name is Changming Fan, local social entrepreneur, local citizens and residents. I want to thank all of you to take care of the people here, especially seniors. And you guys did quite a lot of work, and everybody talk about that. That is just one thing. But I really want to continue to address the issue of the master plan and strategic plan is coming up. I attended several years of these meetings. I'm impressed about how democratic, how well thought is about the plan. But plans are many kinds. Some are strategic plan, last longer time, and also directional related more than technical plans. I think that one of the gentlemen talked about that this is the issue in Saline about long-term plan. I'd like to know if we can have some kind of working session to do something before that, and also try to attract the citizens and whoever care about the Saline. What are we going to do next 5 years, next 10 years, next 20 years? What kind of city we're going to build? What is the future of Saline? What was the past? How can we continue the heritage of this beautiful city? We have a wonderful people here, wonderful leader, the best geographic location, democratic location. But I don't see the major difference between Saline and others. So the great potential here related with the strategy. I like to have more things talk about that, maybe take more times than 2 minutes. I hope that suggestion I made last meeting with Mayor and Mr. CEO about how to use the technology I invented to beautify the city, create jobs, change the environment, and make Saline a different place or better place to live. But I never have a chance. This is the opportunity. I think that we really have to, do I have 10 seconds?
30.
30 seconds. It's good. But I just really, really feel frustrated. And you and I are in a world right now is just changing every minute. But Saline is continue to stay in the status quo. But some unexpected thing happen again and again. In a way, we're in quantum soup. I learned it one. Okay, thank you. Next time.
Thank you. Yep, look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you for those remarks, Chang-Ming. Clerk Royal, did we receive any written comments during or in advance of, well, they would have to be in advance of tonight's meeting to be read at this time?
We did not, but I wanted to call out your notice to, there's an error on the agenda for the upcoming meetings for the budget work session. That's supposed to be April 10th, not 20th.
Ah, okay. Very good. Stands corrected. Well, let me respond very briefly. We appreciate all of the citizen comments. Mr. Rockwell, if there was confusion, what City Council approved this evening was permitting up to 12 chickens on a residential property. So we're not permitting or liberalizing large poultry operations, simply 12 chickens for the production of eggs. And if you'd like to take a look at the ordinance, which I think is very common sense and puts into place some reasonable regulations, Mr. Harrington or staff would be happy to provide that. Mrs. Hess, again, this issue was considered tonight. It was considered at a public hearing at the Planning Commission and was also discussed at the Code Review Committee, which is a public entity. If citizens would like to avail themselves of the democratic process, I would strongly encourage them to connect with us online and on social media. And also, you can always review our council agendas and all of the support material by signing up for updates on documents on demand. And if you have any trouble with that, the clerk's office would be happy to help you. We also provide paper copies of our agenda and all of the corresponding support material here at City Hall as well. To the gentleman from Big George's, first and foremost, we are delighted to have you in the Saline community. I'm a Big George's customer. In fact, I was just bragging to staff this afternoon. I have a refrigerator that I bought in August of 2005 from Big George's that looks like it was just taken off the showroom floor. It's in that good a shape. It was a very sound investment on my part. I will refer you or connect you with the city manager and community development director after the meeting, and I'm sure they will certainly do their part to expedite this issue and get you the answers and approvals you need in the not too distant future, assuming that we have all of the necessary materials and plans and proposals from you and your consultants. But we appreciate you coming here tonight. Thank you very much. One last opportunity for citizen comments. There appear to be none. Then please note our upcoming meetings, and the chair would be happy to entertain a motion to adjourn at 8:14.
Motion to adjourn?
Moved by Gearboss, seconded by Kamir Sulak. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.